Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. There was a lot of attention on the Washington Post from their hit piece article on veterans benefits. Now, the Washington Post has now put out another article, and we're going to read through it here together. So, before we jump into it, I want to throw on a special thank you to Nancy Ray 6710. Nancy Ray, thank you so much for the super comment, super chat. I really do appreciate your support very much, Nancy Ray. Thank you. All right, so jumping into it here, this is the Washington Post, and the article came out October 14th at 7 a.m. Of 2025, and I'm sharing it with you here today. The headline is Veterans Groups Rip Post for Investigation into VA Disability Program. So already, if you're on the same page as me, I don't really think we're ripping them for an investigation into VA disability. I think we're more ripping them because of the broad paintbrush that they're painting every veteran as some sort of fraudster. So I think that that's the first kind of indication of where this may be going, but we'll see. With that, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I really appreciate every thumbs up, every minute watched. Really does help the channel expand its reach, and I do appreciate your support very much. All right, here we go into a subheadline. Veterans groups accuse the Washington Post of overstating problems with the Department of Veterans Affairs disability compensation system and scapegoating former service members. Goes on here to say, veterans groups assailed the Washington Post for publishing an investigation last week into the Department of Veterans Affairs. And as I get this situated, I'd love to get your thoughts on, I guess I already know, but for sure on this article, let me know your thoughts as we go through this. All right. So it goes on here to say that we ripped into them last week for their investigation in the Department of Veterans Affairs disability compensation system, accusing the Post of overstating problems with the program and scapegoating former service members. In two lengthy articles based on 25 years of government data and thousands of pages of public documents, the Post exposed how VA's $193 billion disability program has become prone to rampant exaggeration and fraud. Records show VA has approved millions of claims for minor or treatable afflictions that rarely hinder employment, such as hemorrhoids, acne, hay fever, and sleep apnea. So already they veered off into Neverland. So those are approvable by law. It's not fraudulent to file for those claims. It's not somebody taking advantage of the system. Hay fever, in fact, is sinusitis, right? So there's that. Now, even further, I need to clarify, it's not sinusitis, it's rhinitis. So allergic rhinitis is hay fever. And that is a presumable condition for Gulf War veterans who were inhaling toxic fumes from burn pits. So the fact that they're trying to double down on these treatable afflictions is hilarious to me. These are part of the service connectable conditions in the rating schedules that have been there. Now, treatable or not doesn't mean that you are 100%. Also, they're pointing to employment. Sure, today it might not impact your employment. However, the future, it might impact your employment. VA disability compensation is for that reduced, in my opinion, lifetime. They say your income earning potential, essentially. That's not just today. That's the longevity of it all. So it's funny to me that they say become prone to rampant exaggeration and fraud. Then it just goes on to say that people are filing for hemorrhoids, acne, hay fever, sleep apnea. Those are rateable conditions. Nobody's fraudulent for filing those, just so you know, Washington Post. In addition, you have a whole slew of doctors that have to work with you to get you diagnosed, figure out what the severity is. Oftentimes, you're going through a third-party contractor doctor in a C&P exam, compensation and pension exam, to determine the severity as it relates to the rating schedule, and then you get a percentage if it's even compensable. It could be a 0% percentage, which pays nothing. So anyway, let's move on. The Post reporting found that veteran advocates, for-profit companies, and VA itself encourage vets to file as many claims as possible to maximize their benefits and milk the system. Okay, they add that last, nobody says milk the system, first of all. So veteran advocates, for-profit companies, and VA itself encourage vets to milk the system. Not true. In fact, I am a veteran advocate. I was an accredited veteran service officer, and our message was simple. You should be properly rated. You should be properly rated. If you have 17 conditions that you could file for with the VA due to your service, or they relate to your service in some way, then you should file for those 17. Why would you not? So yes, and that's a good thing. Milking the system? No, that's a ridiculous add-on. Moving on. The reaction from veteran service organizations was swift and harsh, as it should be. Dan Wiley, the national commander of American Legion, issued a statement that called the coverage outrageous and said it paints a one-sided, unbalanced view of the entire veteran population based on a few cases of veterans wrongly defrauding the VA. I agree. They're picking people who have frauded the VA, right? Those people need to be prosecuted. Those people's stories are vast and out there in the world for people to see. Although it is a very small, tiny, minute, doesn't make it right, but it is a minute fraction of the veteran population. Then to turn around and say these people are frauding the system, then to turn over and go, veterans should not file for these claims for these other types of conditions like toenail fungus or alopecia or rhinitis. You shouldn't be filing for those, is essentially what the Washington Post is saying. In other words, they are shaming veterans. Nothing like that to get your day going. All right, so let's move on. Coleman Nee, the national commander of Disabled American Veterans, DAV, said in a statement that his organization was shocked and disgusted by the Post report that veterans were swamping VA with dubious disability claims. The rising number of veterans receiving VA disability compensation isn't a story about widespread abuse or fraud, he said. It's a story about our nation continuing efforts to keep the promise to those who have served during multiple wars over the course of generations. And I'll add in there, look, VA disability compensation is not solely for those that served in combat, right? For example, I'm rated for my left eye. Why? Because during a live fire with 81 millimeter mortars, something flew into my eye, caused major damage, and now my eye is a snow globe, and it's the best way that I could explain it is it's kind of like a cold sore. It will inflame and be all jacked up for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time, multiple times a year. And that was not during combat. So there are a lot of benefits out there for veterans, and really this type of rhetoric dissuades and discourages veterans to file, which is the opposite of what we should be doing. Moving on, Carl Blake, the chief executive of, thank goodness they chimed in and put this in here. The chief executive of PVA, the Paralyzed Veterans of America, likewise issued a statement that said his group was outraged at Washington Post's decision to paint most veterans with service-connected disabilities as fraudsters and cheats. The overall trend here is everybody read the same thing and came away with the same conclusion. The broad brushstroke of all veterans are frauds and cheats is what everybody walked away with from that article. And so for the Post to sit there and think that, oh, well, we're just upset, but, we got it wrong. The reality is that this was a piece about, uncovering this stuff in the VA. No, it's not. It's shaming veterans is what it is. Moving on. Other groups used more strident imagery and language. Veterans of Foreign Wars posted on its website a cartoon of a firing squad depicting the Post as an executioner aiming a rifle at veterans. A coalition of 23 other organizations led by the National Defense Committee signed a public letter asking, would the Post prefer the wounded military personnel to have bled out on the battlefield rather than live and file a disability claim? Sure sounds that way. And what the Post doesn't get is that, especially when it comes to presumptive conditions like rhinitis, that these are presumed. The medical field has determined that it is more likely than not that people who have been sniffing in these horrendous toxic fumes from burn pits are more likely to develop this horrible condition. And you're going to be compensated for that, and you should file for that. Veterans advocacy groups have lobbied Congress for decades to expand VA disability programs and make it easier for veterans to receive compensation. A landmark achievement came in 2022 when, I hate this part because it's so unaware. A landmark achievement came in 2022 when lawmakers passed legislation known as the Pact Act, which made it simpler for generations of veterans to file their ailments were caused by exposure to toxic substances and other environmental hazards. Should be a kudos, should be a thank you, should be a that's the right thing. Essentially, the Pact Act really broadened presumptive conditions, specifically for Gulf War era veterans, but they did add a couple for Vietnam era veterans. Again, in order for it to be a presumptive condition, you had to have served in a certain place during a certain time and have that condition. In most of these cases, it's a combat area, So yes, it should be easier. Representative Mark Takano, the top Democrat on the House Committee of Veterans Affairs, criticized the articles for omitting what he called essential context, saying in the news release that the Pact Act had driven much of the increase in disability compensation. The rise in claims isn't evidence of mass fraud, he added. It's proof that veterans are finally accessing the benefits they were long owed. I 1,000% agree. Look, in the 1960s and 70s, veterans wanted nothing to do with the government. Came home and said, you know what, screw it all. And they never even really talked about it. Then you get into the 80s and 90s, and nobody knows what's even available. It wasn't until the 2000s and later into the 2000s that we really started to get educated and understand and have availability out there to know what's even available through the internet, right? This has become a game changer for the veteran community to understand what was actually included into your benefits package. This is not something that was really discussed during your time in service because it wasn't the mission at hand. So it wasn't until 10, 15 years ago where veterans were really learning from each other, reading stuff on blogs online, and now with YouTube, that type of stuff, maybe over the last 8, 10 years, stuff has started to creep up there, and it's an awareness thing, and it is also the reduction of stigma around conditions. So you have two things: you have awareness going up, and you have stigma dropping, thus driving more action for people to actually go obtain the benefits that they earned through their selfless, honorable service to our nation with a blank check payable up till death, right? It's part of our benefits package for that. All right, the Post investigation found that exploitation of VA's disability program has worsened under the watch of both political parties over 2 decades. Nonetheless, some accuse the Post's reporting of being politically biased. Okay, I didn't really get a politically biased thing, but I will say this. Anytime the government gives away anything in the form of compensation or monetary benefit, you're going to have fraud involved, sadly, and that's evidenced in the Social Security Administration as well. So that's going to happen. And the more people that you have accessing it, the more likelihood there's going to be a higher number of, it's basic. It's a basic information to understand. So fraud is wrong. Be properly rated. Do what you need to do to make sure that you have your claims in order for your specific conditions. It's very nuanced, the world of VA. We always encourage people to work with accredited veteran service officers and veteran service reps. If you cannot find one, then we are happy to help give you a firm understanding of your current situation as former accredited veteran service officer, former accredited representative, former VA employees and raters and so forth on the team here to help you. All right, so moves on. Common Defense and Progressive Veterans Organization, Progressive Veterans Organization, accused the Post of supporting conservatives who want to privatize VA services. This kind of story perpetuates a false narrative that veterans are abusing the system, said Naveed Saha. I'm not sure. The group's political director, in a press release. It minimizes our service and lays the groundwork for dismantling the VA, something Republican administrations have tried to do for years. Okay, maybe, sure. Look, any political party on either side will take whatever news is. Don't let any bad story go unwasted, right? Take advantage of that and use it to your advantage to push whatever you want to push. Sure, I get that. Another piece here that really bothers me is this type of rhetoric and story does 2 super negative things. 1, it pits the American people against the veteran. And 2, it shames veterans and makes them not go file claims. Why is it important to file a claim for disability compensation? So then you can get into the VA system and be treated for that condition, right? Whether it be your bad back, your bad knee, your PTSD, your MST, your TBI, right? So do we put our head in the ground and not go file a claim and not get that doorway into VA healthcare? All right, let's move on. Veterans Affairs Secretary Doug Collins, however, criticized the Post for being too liberal. Nobody wants to read their crazy Trump deranged ramblings, he wrote in a post on X. Collins has not responded to interview requests from the Post. During an appearance the Fox Business Network last week, he ripped the newspaper's coverage of his department as unfair. I think there's a desk over there at the Washington Post that says, let's write a bad article about the VA this week, because that's all we get from them, he told Fox anchor Maria Bartiromo. The 2 articles last week generated an unusually heavy reader response, more than 5,000 comments online, and scores of emails and phone calls. Some readers echoed the complaints from the advocacy groups, but others, including many veterans, said the problem highlighted by the Post were the tip of the iceberg. Salia Kozan, an international psychologist, said she worked for 3 years at a mental health organization where an unlicensed clinician essentially guaranteed a diagnosis of PTSD for veterans seeking VA disability benefits. Okay, so that doesn't sound to me like that's the veteran's problem. That sounds to me like that's the unlicensed clinician having a problem and horrible ethical standards, right? So just want to throw that out there. Kozan said the practice failed to conduct objective and comprehensive assessment based on professional standards. Sounds like that's an organizational problem and horrible leadership and bad employees, not veterans. Again, there were hundreds of diagnoses that were very similar, she said, adding that she worried VA would eventually catch on that the reports were substandard or invalid. Oftentimes, just so you know, and I would love for, I personally have not filed for PTSD. I have helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of individuals go through the process filing for PTSD. Not an easy, fun claim to file. It's not a fun process. It's not fun reliving everything. It's not fun talking through it. It's not fun. None of that is fun. Going to your C&P exam, which will happen, is not fun. So it really, how much is this clinician that's saying that you have PTSD really weighing into the conversation when you get to the C&P exam and you're going through that whole process again? I'd love to get your comments. All right. In May, Kozan said she filed a whistleblower complaint about her former workplace with VA's Office of the Inspector General. In August, she received a boilerplate reply, which is normal, asking her to provide the full names of veterans negatively impacted by her allegation. She told the Post she let the matter drop because she is prohibited under the law from disclosing information about individual patients, something she said the investigators should have known. I believe it is their job to investigate, she said. I am not an investigator. That is not my job. Steve Carey, a 60-year-old Marine Corps veteran, contacted the Post to report an opposite problem. He said VA had mistakenly paid him more than $100,000 in disability benefits and had ignored his pleas to stop giving him money. Carey, the chairman and founder of a government relations consulting firm based in Washington, said he applied for disability benefits 3 years ago after he tested positive for an aggressive form of cancer. When he was in the Marines in 1980, or in the 80s, Carey was stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where troops were exposed to contaminated water for decades, making him eligible for compensation because of his cancer diagnosis. VA approved his claim and began paying him more than $3,500 a month. Soon after, however, Carey underwent additional testing and learned he didn't have cancer after all. He said he called VA to report the good news and to request an end to his disability compensation, but VA representatives surprised him by saying, "My bosses aren't going to like this." I said, "Look, you should be happy because you can cut my payments off and give them to someone who needs it," he said. Okay, look, I got to stop there. And this is right at the end. This is the words that I hate so much. Give it to somebody else who needs it. This is also a way that shames veterans for filing for VA disability compensation because they think somebody else is not getting it if they get it. That's not how it works. There's plenty, and they will make it happen if we show the need. So do not think to yourself, you going after VA disability compensation is taking away from somebody on your left or right. That's simply not true. In fact, it's probably the other way. You're helping to preserve benefits for the future generations. All right, so let's go back to this. So this guy says, hey, look, you should be happy because you can cut my payments off and give them to someone who needs it, he said. But the payments kept coming despite repeated follow-up requests that they stop. Carey said he has set aside the money in hopes that VA will agree to take the money back someday. I don't need it, he said. Okay, and that's great. Look, problems happen all over the place. I would suggest to that individual, reach out to your congressional member, let them know, go to an accredited representative, talk with them. You can file a claim asking for your condition to be reduced. Another thing to think about is the fact that if you had cancer and then magically you don't the next day, it could resurface in a matter of months. So don't be so quick to go, hallelujah, I'm healed. And just for those that hung on here till the end, No, the VA does not reduce a 100% rating immediately after cancer remission. It continues the temporary 100% rating for 6 months after the completion of treatment, and then reevaluates the veteran's condition to determine a new rating based on any residual effects. The new rating will reflect any lingering disabilities from the cancer or its treatment, such as chronic pain or organ damage, so residual impacts. So here's another aspect to this. And again, because everything is so nuanced, veteran has cancer. Veteran supplies all the information to the VA. They got diagnosed and they got their cancer, all that stuff from some outside private civilian, cancer treatment facility or what have you. They submit all that. They get their claim approved. They get 100%. Now they keep going to this individual that's outside of the VA, this cancer treatment facility, and all of a sudden they're, hey, you're deemed cleared. You're good to go. Awesome. You cannot just call the VA and say, hey, stop my payments. I'm good to go. That would be horrific for the VA to do that. They need hardcore evidence that your condition of cancer being active has actually gone into remission, stayed in remission, had follow-up appointments, and so forth. So I don't know what this guy did. Did he just, it doesn't sound like I kept going to the VA and they kept calling me clear for 6 months. They told me I had to wait 6 months and then I had to go back for a follow-up. I did my follow-up and I'm good to go. He didn't say any of that. So it sounds to me, I could be wrong, that he's going to somewhere outside the VA and he's not informing the VA in the proper channels. He's just calling up and saying, hey, end my compensation, please. My cancer's cured. Okay. It's not how it works. And you should probably go to the VA and medical and have that conversation. With that, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you very much. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.